The rain hammered against the windows of our suburban home in Portland, Oregon, creating a steady rhythm that matched the pounding in my chest. I stood in the kitchen, my hands trembling slightly as I arranged the roasted chicken on the serving platter. The smell of garlic and rosemary filled the air, but brought me no comfort tonight. Through the archway, I could hear voices in the dining room. My daughter Sophie's laugh cut through the air, sharp and bright, followed by my husband Brandon's deeper chuckle. They were talking about something, but I couldn't make out the words. I took a deep breath and carried the platter toward the dining room. The table was set beautifully. I had spent the entire afternoon making sure everything was perfect. White tablecloth, the good china we usually saved for holidays, fresh flowers in the center. Tonight was supposed to be special. Brandon's parents, Judith and Robert, sat at one end of the table, their faces pleasant but reserved. Sophie, my 23-year-old daughter, sat across from her younger brother, Nathan, who was scrolling through his phone despite my earlier request to put it away. Brandon occupied the head of the table. His tie loosened after a long day at the architecture firm. I set the platter down and took my seat. Nobody looked up. Nobody said anything about the meal I had spent hours preparing. The silence stretched, broken only by the clink of silverware as everyone began serving themselves. I watched as Brandon cut into the chicken, as Judith passed the potatoes to Robert, as Sophie texted someone under the table. Nathan finally put his phone down, but kept his eyes on his plate. I cleared my throat softly. "Can I have everyone's attention for just a moment?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Sophie glanced up, irritation flickering across her face. "Mom, we're eating. Can it wait?" I clasped my hands together in my lap, feeling the familiar tightness in my chest that had become my constant companion over the past few months. I just wanted to say something. It's been a while since we've all been together like this, and I thought maybe we could go around the table and share something good that happened this week. Just something small, too. "Oh my God," Sophie interrupted, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Are we in kindergarten? Brandon, tell her we're not doing icebreakers at dinner." Brandon chuckled, shaking his head as he reached for the wine bottle. "Honey, maybe we can just eat. It's been a long day." I felt my face flush. The heat crept up my neck and settled in my cheeks. Judith looked at me with something that might have been pity, and that made it worse. I picked up my fork and stabbed at a piece of chicken on my plate, suddenly not hungry at all. The conversation resumed around me, flowing as if I hadn't spoken at all. Sophie talked about her new job at the marketing agency downtown, how her boss had praised her presentation that morning. Brandon discussed a new project his firm had landed, a commercial building in the Pearl District. Judith mentioned their upcoming cruise to Alaska. I sat there, invisible. The chicken tasted like cardboard in my mouth. I chewed mechanically, swallowed, took a sip of water. Repeat. This had become my life. Somewhere along the way, I had faded into the background of my own family. I thought back to when Sophie was little, how she used to run to me when I came home, how she'd climb into my lap and tell me every detail of her day. I remembered Nathan as a baby, how he'd only calm down when I held him, how Brandon used to call me his rock. Now I was just furniture, useful only for the functions I served. Cooking, cleaning, making sure everyone had what they needed. "Mom, can you pass the salt?" Nathan's voice broke through my thoughts. I reached for the salt shaker and handed it to him. He took it without meeting my eyes, without a thank you. I set my fork down and folded my napkin in my lap, my appetite completely gone. The conversation continued. Sophie talked about a guy she'd been seeing, someone named Connor who worked in tech. Brandon offered unsolicited advice about not getting too serious too fast. Judith shared her opinion on modern dating. I might as well have been a ghost. "So, Mom," Sophie said suddenly, her tone dripping with false sweetness, "how was your day? Did you do anything interesting? Or did you just stay home like always?" The question felt like a trap, but I answered anyway. "I actually went to the library this morning." I've been thinking about volunteering there, maybe helping with their literacy program. That's still a thing? Sophie interrupted again, her eyebrows raised. I mean, does anyone even go to libraries anymore? Everything's online now. Brandon laughed. She's got a point. When's the last time I checked out an actual book? Libraries do a lot more than just lend books, I said quietly, feeling defensive. They provide community services, internet access for people who don't have it at home, programs for children and seniors. Sure, Mom. Whatever you say. Sophie took a long sip of her wine, her eyes never leaving mine. I just think it's funny that you're looking for something to do when there's plenty to do right here. I mean, have you seen the state of the garage? Or the garden? The weeds are taking over. I felt something crack inside me, just a little. A hairline fracture in the dam I'd been building for months, maybe years. Sophie, I've been asking your father to help me with the garage for 3 months. And the garden is on my list. But I can't do everything by myself. Well, you're home all day. Sophie shot back. What else are you doing? The table went quiet. Even Nathan looked up from his plate. Brandon shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but he didn't say anything. Judith pursed her lips and glanced at Robert, who suddenly became very interested in his mashed potatoes. I stared at my daughter, at this young woman I'd raised, nursed through illnesses, helped through heartbreaks and homework and every challenge she'd faced. When had she started looking at me with such contempt? I work, I said, my voice steady despite the trembling I felt inside. I may not have a job title or a paycheck, but I work. I take care of this house. I take care of all of you. Come on, Mom. Don't be so dramatic. Sophie leaned back in her chair, her arms crossed. I'm just saying that if you have time to volunteer at a library, you have time to actually take care of things around here. Dad works 12-hour days. I'm building my career. Even Nathan has school and his internship. You're just home. The crack widened. I could feel it spreading through my chest, through my composure, through the careful mask I'd been wearing for so long. Just home, I repeated softly. Yeah. Sophie shrugged, as if this conversation was boring her. I mean, what do you actually do all day? Honestly, sometimes I think you're kind of useless, Mom. No offense. The words hung in the air like smoke. Useless. My daughter had just called me useless. At a family dinner. In front of everyone. And nobody said anything. Brandon looked uncomfortable, but remained silent. Judith suddenly found her napkin fascinating. Robert coughed and reached for his water glass. Nathan stared at his plate. Nobody defended me. Nobody told Sophie that she'd crossed a line, that her words were cruel and unfair. The silence was deafening. I looked around the table at these people I'd dedicated my life to. Brandon, who I'd supported through graduate school, working 2 jobs so he could focus on his studies. Sophie, who I'd stayed up with through countless sleepless nights, who I'd cheered for at every soccer game and school play. Nathan, my quiet boy who I'd advocated for when teachers didn't understand his learning style, who I'd fought for when he needed extra support. Judith and Robert, who I'd hosted for holidays year after year, who I'd cared for when Robert had his surgery 2 years ago, staying with them for a week while Judith recovered from her own stress. And I was useless. The rain continued its assault on the windows. The candles I'd lit flickered in their holders, casting dancing shadows across the faces of my family. I felt something shift inside me, something fundamental. The dam didn't just crack. It shattered. But instead of breaking down, instead of crying or getting angry or leaving the table, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I placed my hands flat on the table and looked directly at Sophie. You think I'm useless, I said. My voice was quiet but clear. You think that because I don't have a corner office or a business card, my life has no value. You think that because I'm just home, I don't contribute anything meaningful to this family. Sophie opened her mouth to respond, but I held up my hand. For the first time in years, I didn't let someone talk over me. Let me tell you what useless looks like, I continued. The calm I felt was almost eerie, like standing in the eye of a hurricane. 24 years ago, I was finishing my master's degree in civil engineering. I had a job offer from Morrison Engineering, one of the top firms in the country. The starting salary was $90,000. That was 24 years ago. Do you know what that would be worth today? Nobody answered. Sophie's face had gone pale. Brandon's jaw was tight. I turned down that job, I said, because your father got his dream position here in Portland, and I was 3 months pregnant with you, Sophie. We decided together that one of us should be home with the baby, at least for the first few years. Brandon's career was just taking off. It made sense for it to be me. So I put my career on hold. Just for a little while, we said. Just until you were in school. I looked at Nathan. Then you came along. Another beautiful surprise. And by then, Sophie was in elementary school. Thriving, but she needed me. Remember Nathan? You had sensory processing issues. The school wanted to put you in special education. But I knew you were brilliant. You just learned differently. So I spent hours researching, finding specialists, working with you at home. I became an expert in childhood development and learning disabilities because that's what you needed. Nathan's eyes were wide. He'd never heard this story. I worked, I said, my voice growing stronger. I worked as a substitute teacher when you were both in school, taking whatever shifts I could fit around your schedules. I did freelance consulting for engineering firms, projects I could do from home, often late at night after everyone was asleep. I managed this household like a business because that's what it is. Budgeting, planning, organizing, problem solving. I made sure every bill was paid on time, every appointment was kept, every need was met. But that's just mom stuff, Sophie said weakly. That's what moms do. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Just mom stuff. Let me break down what just mom stuff looks like financially. I cook every meal. That's roughly 21 meals a week times 4 people. If we ate out for every meal at even a modest $15 per person, that would be $1,260 a week. $65,000 a year. But I'm sure that's useless. The table was completely silent now. Even the rain seemed to have quieted. I cleaned this house, I continued. A cleaning service for a home this size would cost about $300 a week. That's $15,600 a year. I do the laundry, the grocery shopping, the meal planning. I schedule everyone's appointments, maintain the cars, manage the household repairs. I coordinate with contractors, handle the insurance claims, organize family events. The value of a household manager with my level of responsibility would be at least $60,000 a year. Honey, Brandon started, but I cut him off. I'm not finished. I've been keeping track, you see. Not because I wanted to throw it in anyone's face, but because I needed to know. I needed to see it written down to remind myself that my work had value, even when nobody else seemed to notice. I turned back to Sophie. Your college tuition. We could have taken out loans like most families, but I didn't want you starting your life in debt. So I took that inheritance from my mother, $50,000 that she left specifically to me, and I put it toward your education. I could have used it to go back to school myself, to restart my career. But I chose you. Sophie's eyes were filling with tears, but I wasn't done. Last year, when you wanted to do that unpaid internship in Seattle, do you remember who made that possible? You lived with Aunt Rebecca, but someone had to cover your expenses, your food, your transportation, your spending money. I sold my mother's jewelry to give you that opportunity. Those pieces were the last things I had from her, but your dreams felt more important than my sentimentality. I could hear Judith's sharp intake of breath. She'd admired that jewelry, had even asked about it recently. And Brandon, I said, turning to my husband, when your firm was struggling 5 years ago, when you almost went under and we were looking at bankruptcy, who took out a personal loan to keep us afloat? I used my credit, my financial history. We told everyone it was from my freelance work, but it was borrowed money. I've been paying it back quietly a little bit each month from the small projects I still take on. You never asked where that money came from. You just accepted it and moved on. Brandon's face had gone gray. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't know. You didn't ask, I said simply. None of you ever asked. You just assumed that everything happened by magic, that the house ran itself, that money appeared when we needed it, that problems solved themselves. But it was me. All along it was me. I stood up slowly, my legs shaky but holding. I looked at each person at the table. My family. The people I'd built my entire adult life around. I am not useless, I said quietly. I am the foundation this entire family is built on. And maybe you couldn't see it because foundations are supposed to be invisible, buried underground, supporting everything above them without acknowledgement or praise. But let me tell you what happens when you ignore a foundation for too long. It cracks. It weakens. It fails. The silence that followed was absolute. Sophie was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face. Nathan looked stricken, his usual teenage indifference replaced by something that looked like horror. Brandon couldn't meet my eyes. Judith and Robert sat frozen, witnesses to the unraveling of what they'd probably thought was a happy family. I've been going to therapy, I said, twice a week for the last 3 months. That's where I've been on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons when you all thought I was at yoga or running errands. I've been trying to figure out why I felt so empty, why I could be surrounded by my family and feel completely alone. My therapist helped me see that I've been making myself smaller and smaller, trying to fit into the spaces between all of your needs and wants, until there was almost nothing left of me. Mom, Sophie choked out. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. I didn't know. I picked up my purse from the side table and pulled out a folder. Inside were printed pages, documents I'd been preparing for weeks. I set them on the table. These are applications, I said, for jobs. Senior positions at 3 different engineering firms. I have interviews next week. I've also been accepted into a graduate program to update my credentials. It starts in January. You're going back to work? Nathan asked, his voice small. Yes, I said. I'm going back to work. Not because we need the money, though it will help. Not because I have something to prove, though maybe I do. But because I need to remember who I was before I became just a wife, just a mother, just the person who makes sure everyone else's life runs smoothly while her own stands still. I walked toward the door, then turned back one last time. Dinner is on the table. There's pie in the kitchen for dessert. The coffee maker is set to brew in 20 minutes. I'll be at the Riverside Hotel downtown. I've booked a room for the weekend. I need some time to think, and I need you all to see what it's like when the foundation isn't there to hold everything up. Brandon stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Wait, please don't go. We can talk about this. We've been talking, Brandon. Or rather, I've been trying to talk and being ignored for years. The time for talking is over. Now it's time for you all to listen. And sometimes the only way to make people listen is to stop being available for them to ignore. I walked out the front door into the rain. It soaked through my cardigan immediately, cold and shocking against my skin. But I didn't care. I got into my car, started the engine, and pulled out of the driveway. In my rearview mirror, I could see them all standing in the doorway, watching me leave. Sophie was holding on to Brandon, both of them looking lost. It hurt to see them like that, but it hurt more to think about staying, about continuing to be invisible in my own life. The drive downtown took 20 minutes. The city lights blurred through my rain-covered windshield, streaks of red and white and gold. Portland looked different tonight, full of possibility instead of routine. The Riverside Hotel was nice, nothing extravagant, but it had a beautiful view of the Willamette River. I checked in, rode the elevator to the 8th floor, and entered my room. It was quiet, blessedly, perfectly quiet. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally let myself cry. Not sad tears, exactly. Something more complicated. Relief and grief and fear and hope all mixed together. I cried for the young woman I'd been, brilliant and ambitious, who'd had the whole world ahead of her. I cried for the mother I'd become, who'd loved her children so much she'd forgotten to save anything for herself. I cried for the wife who'd stood beside her husband through everything, only to realize he'd stopped seeing her somewhere along the way. But I also cried because something had shifted tonight. I had spoken up. I'd told the truth. I'd walked out that door. And even though I didn't know what came next, even though I was scared and unsure, I felt more alive than I had in years. My phone buzzed. Text messages were coming in rapid fire. Sophie, Nathan, Brandon, even Judith. I turned the phone face down on the nightstand without reading them. Tomorrow I would deal with tomorrow. Tonight was mine. I ordered room service, took a long hot bath, and went to bed early. Outside my window, the rain continued to fall on the city, washing everything clean. I woke up to weak sunlight filtering through the hotel curtains. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then it all came rushing back. The dinner, Sophie's words, my revelation, walking out. I reached for my phone and saw 47 text messages, 12 missed calls, and several voicemails. My finger hovered over the screen, but I set it back down. Not yet. I wasn't ready yet. Instead, I ordered breakfast from room service and sat by the window watching the river. The Willamette moved slowly below, gray-brown and steady. Boats dotted its surface, people going about their Saturday morning routines. The rain had stopped overnight, leaving everything clean and bright. I thought about what I'd said last night, running through every word in my mind. Had I been too harsh? Had I exaggerated? But no, every word had been true. That was the thing about truth. It didn't need embellishment. My coffee arrived, along with scrambled eggs, toast, and fresh fruit. I ate slowly, savoring each bite. When was the last time I'd eaten a meal that someone else had prepared, that I didn't have to clean up after? I couldn't remember. After breakfast, I took a long shower, standing under the hot water until my skin turned pink. I dressed in comfortable clothes and sat down with my laptop. I had interviews to prepare for, career development to catch up on, a life to rebuild. But first, I needed to read the messages. Sophie had sent 15 texts throughout the night. The first ones were defensive. "Mom, you're being dramatic. You can't just leave like this." Then they shifted. "I'm sorry. Please come home. We need to talk." The most recent one, sent at 3 a.m, simply said, "I love you. I'm so sorry I made you feel worthless. You're not. You're everything." I felt tears prick my eyes but blinked them away. Nathan had sent fewer messages, but each one cut deep. "Mom, I never knew about the school stuff. Thank you for fighting for me. And later, I took you for granted. I see that now. Please come back." Brandon's messages were longer, more desperate. He'd called 7 times. His texts ranged from confusion to anger to what seemed like genuine remorse. "I don't understand why you didn't tell me things were this bad. We're supposed to be partners. Then I failed you. I see that now. I stopped seeing you. Please let me make this right." Even Judith had texted, "Dear, I owe you an apology. Robert and I have stayed silent too many times when we should have spoken up. You've been wonderful to our family, and we haven't shown proper appreciation. I hope you can forgive us all." I set the phone down and stared out the window again. They were sorry. They understood now. But understanding that comes only after someone reaches their breaking point. Is it genuine? Or is it just fear of loss? I didn't have an answer to that yet. My phone rang. Brandon. I stared at his name on the screen for a long moment before answering. "Hello," I said. "Thank God." His voice was rough, like he'd been crying or hadn't slept. "Are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm fine. I'm safe. That's all you need to know right now. Please come home. We need to talk about this face to face." "No," I said firmly. "Not yet. You all need time to sit with what I said, to really think about it. If I come back now, everything will go back to normal. You'll apologize, maybe things will be better for a week or 2, and then we'll slip right back into the same patterns." "That's not fair," Brandon said, frustration creeping into his voice. "You dropped a bomb on us and then left. You didn't give us a chance to respond. I've been trying to talk to you for years, Brandon. Years. I've brought up how I was feeling, how invisible I felt, how exhausted I was. Do you remember what you always said? You told me I was being too sensitive. You told me that's just how marriage is. You told me I needed to manage my time better. I gave you chances to respond. You chose not to hear me. Silence on the other end. Then, quietly, you're right. I'm sorry. I know you are. But sorry isn't enough anymore. I need to see change. Real change. Not just words, but actions. Tell me what you want. Tell me what I need to do. I laughed, but it was sad. Brandon, if I have to tell you how to value me, then you're not really valuing me. You're just following instructions. I need you to figure that out yourself. That's impossible. How am I supposed to know what you need if you don't tell me? You could start by thinking about it, by paying attention, by asking me questions, and actually listening to the answers instead of waiting for your turn to talk. I paused, gathering my thoughts. I've made an appointment with a marriage counselor for next Friday. I'll text you the details. If you want to work on this, you'll be there. If not, then we'll know where we stand. I'll be there, he said quickly. I promise. Okay, I'm going to go now. I have things I need to do today. Will you at least talk to the kids? They're really upset. Sophie hasn't stopped crying. Guilt tried to worm its way into my chest, but I pushed it back. I'll text them. But I'm not coming home until Monday at the earliest. You all need to figure out how to function without me for a couple of days. The house is a mess. Nobody knows where anything is. I don't even know what we have for food. Then I guess you'll figure it out, I said. Welcome to my daily life, Brandon. I ended the call before he could respond. My hands were shaking slightly. Setting boundaries felt unnatural, almost cruel. But I knew from therapy that boundaries weren't cruel. They were necessary. I texted Sophie and Nathan. I love you both more than anything in this world. I'm safe and I'm okay. I need some time to myself to think. I'll be home soon. Please don't call me today. I'll reach out when I'm ready. Then I silenced my phone and put it in my bag. The rest of Saturday stretched ahead of me, gloriously empty. I decided to explore the city like a tourist. I walked through the Pearl District, browsed bookstores, had lunch at a small cafe where nobody knew me or needed anything from me. I sat in Powell's books for 2 hours, reading in a comfortable chair, surrounded by thousands of stories. In the late afternoon, I visited the Portland Art Museum. I stood in front of paintings and let myself feel whatever came up. Beauty, sadness, joy, all the emotions I'd been too numb to access for so long. That evening, I treated myself to dinner at a nice restaurant overlooking the river. I ordered wine and appetizers and an entree that was too expensive. I ate slowly, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Other diners sat in couples or groups, laughing and talking. I sat alone, and it felt like a victory instead of a punishment. Back at the hotel, I worked on my interview preparations. I researched the companies, updated my portfolio, practiced answers to likely questions. It felt good to use my brain this way again, to think about complex problems and elegant solutions. Engineering had always made sense to me. Buildings and bridges followed rules. Mathematics didn't care about feelings or expectations. It was clean and logical and predictable. Unlike families, Sunday morning, I allowed myself to check my messages again. Brandon had sent photos. The kitchen, dishes piled in the sink. The living room, throw pillows scattered, newspapers on the floor. A selfie of him and Nathan trying to figure out the washing machine. The caption said, "We're hopeless without you. Please come home." But there was another message too, this one from Sophie. "Mom, can we meet for coffee? Just you and me? I need to talk to you in person. I have so much to say, and text isn't enough." I hesitated. Was it too soon? Would meeting with Sophie derail the progress I'd made? But she was my daughter. Despite everything, I wanted to hear what she had to say. I texted back, "Okay, meet me at Blue Star Cafe at noon." I arrived early and chose a table in the back corner. The cafe was busy with the Sunday brunch crowd, filled with the smell of fresh coffee and baking bread. Sophie walked in at noon exactly. She looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, no makeup, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She'd been crying, that much was obvious. When she saw me, her face crumpled. "Mom," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "Hi, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." The words tumbled out in a rush. "I was awful to you. I said horrible, unforgivable things. I don't even know why I said them. I was showing off, I think. Trying to be funny or clever in front of Dad and the grandparents. I didn't mean any of it. I sipped my coffee waiting. There was more. I could tell." Sophie twisted her napkin in her hands. "I've been thinking about everything you said. About the money. About the sacrifices you made. I had no idea, Mom. I thought you chose to stay home because you wanted to. I thought you liked it. I did like parts of it," I said honestly. "I loved raising you and your brother. I don't regret that time. But somewhere along the way, being a mother became my only identity. I lost myself in taking care of everyone else. But you never said anything. You always seemed fine. I tried to say something, many times, but nobody was listening. And after a while it became easier to just stop trying. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. When did you start resenting me, Sophie?" She flinched. "I don't resent you. You called me useless. That doesn't come from nowhere." Sophie was quiet for a long time. Then, softly, "I think I was angry at you for not being more. For not having a career like Dad. For just being home all the time. My friends' moms were lawyers and doctors and executives. They were important. And you were just there. Just there," I repeated. The word stung, but I kept my voice level. "That came out wrong." Sophie was crying now. "I mean, you were always available. Always at home. It made me feel like you didn't have anything else going on. Like your life was small. And I was embarrassed by that. Which is horrible. I'm a horrible person. You're not horrible. You're young, and you've been taught by society that a woman's value comes from her career and her paycheck. I internalized those same messages. That's why I felt so worthless despite doing so much. We're both products of a culture that devalues care work. But you gave up so much for me," Sophie said. "Your career, your dreams, your inheritance. How do I ever make that right?" "You don't," I said simply. "You can't pay back a parent's sacrifices. That's not how it works. But you can recognize them. You can value them. You can make sure that if you have children someday, you remember what real work looks like, whether it comes with a paycheck or not. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not. But I'm going to give it to you anyway, because you're my daughter and I love you." I reached across the table and took her hand. "But Sophie, things have to change. I can't go back to being invisible. I won't. I don't want you to. Tell me what you need. Tell me how I can help. Start by seeing me as a whole person, not just as your mother. Ask me about my life, my thoughts, my dreams. Include me in conversations. Listen when I speak. It's that simple and that complicated." We talked for 2 more hours. Sophie asked me questions she'd never asked before. About my childhood, my time in college, my plans for going back to work. She told me about her own struggles with imposter syndrome at her new job. Her fear that she wasn't good enough. We found common ground in unexpected places. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward pauses and moments of tension. But it was real. More real than any conversation we'd had in years. As we were leaving, Sophie hugged me tightly. "Thank you for not giving up on us," she whispered. "I'm not sure I haven't," I said honestly. "We have a long way to go. All of us. I know. But we'll get there. I'll make sure of it." I drove back to the hotel feeling lighter, but still uncertain. One conversation didn't fix everything. Sophie's apology didn't erase the years of being taken for granted. But it was a start. Maybe that was enough for now. That evening, I called Nathan. We had a shorter conversation, but it was equally important. He told me he'd started looking up information about sensory processing disorder, trying to understand what I'd gone through to help him. "Mom, I always thought I was just bad at school. I didn't know you fought for me like that. You literally changed my life, and I never even thanked you. You were a child, Nathan. You didn't need to thank me. That was my job as your parent. But I'm not a child anymore. I'm 19. I should notice things. I should help more." Yes, I agreed. "You should. And now you can start." We made a plan. When I came home, he would take over certain household responsibilities. Grocery shopping, yard work, his own laundry. Small things that would make a difference. It felt good to hear him take initiative, to see him stepping up without being asked. Monday morning arrived too quickly. Checkout time was noon, but I'd told Brandon I'd be home by 2. I packed my small bag slowly, reluctant to leave the cocoon of the hotel room. This space had become a sanctuary, a place where I could just be myself without anyone's needs pressing in on me. But I couldn't stay forever. Real life was waiting. I drove home slowly, taking the long route through the city. When I pulled into our driveway, I sat in the car for a few minutes, gathering my courage. The house looked the same from the outside. Red brick, white trim, the Japanese maple in the front yard starting to turn color with the changing season. But I was different. I'd left as someone small and invisible. I was coming back as someone who'd found her voice. Brandon opened the door before I reached it. He looked exhausted, his shirt wrinkled, his hair uncombed. We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. Then he stepped aside to let me in. The house was a disaster. Dishes covered every surface in the kitchen. Laundry overflowed from baskets in the hallway. The living room looked like a tornado had hit it. I surveyed the damage without comment. "We didn't know where anything was," Brandon said apologetically. "I couldn't find the dish soap or the laundry detergent. I didn't know what temperature to wash colors versus whites. Nathan tried to make dinner last night and somehow burned water. Where was Sophie? She came over to help, but she didn't know much more than we did." Brandon ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I knew meant he was stressed. It made me realize how much you do, how much we've all taken for granted. I set my bag down. "Good. That was the point. Please don't be angry. We're trying." "I'm not angry, Brandon. I'm tired. Tired of being the only one who knows how this household runs. Tired of being the only one who plans and organizes and remembers. So here's what's going to happen. I'm not cleaning this up. You are. All of you. I'll answer questions if you have them, but I'm not doing it for you." Brandon nodded slowly. "Okay, that's fair. Can you at least tell me where the vacuum cleaner is?" "It's in the hall closet, where it's been for the entire 12 years we've lived in this house." He had the grace to look embarrassed. "Right. Of course." I walked upstairs to our bedroom, my sanctuary, and found it in the same state of chaos as the rest of the house. Clothes everywhere, the bed unmade, towels on the floor. I closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and took a deep breath. This was going to be harder than I thought. Not the physical work of fixing everything, but the emotional work of holding my ground, of not slipping back into old patterns just because it was easier. Over the next few hours, I heard the sounds of my family attempting to clean. The vacuum running in stops and starts. The clang of dishes. Occasional cursing from Nathan. The washing machine buzzing repeatedly because someone had unbalanced the load. I stayed in the bedroom, reading a book, forcing myself not to go downstairs and fix everything. This was their lesson to learn. Around 6 in the evening, there was a soft knock on the bedroom door. "Come in," I said. Brandon entered, looking slightly more put together. "I made dinner." "Well, I ordered pizza, but I put it on plates." "That counts, right?" Despite everything, I smiled. "It's a start. Will you come down and eat with us? Please?" I followed him downstairs. The kitchen was cleaner, though not perfect. The counters had been wiped down. Most of the dishes were in the dishwasher, and the floor looked recently swept. The dining room table was set with plates and napkins. Sophie and Nathan were already seated, both looking nervous. We sat down to eat in awkward silence. Finally, Nathan spoke up. Mom, I'm sorry for ignoring you at dinner Friday night, and for basically ignoring you for the past few years. I was being a selfish teenager. You still are a teenager, I said, but I appreciate the apology. Sophie cleared her throat. I talked to my therapist today. I made an emergency appointment. She helped me understand that I was projecting my own insecurities onto you. I've been feeling inadequate at work, like everyone else is more competent and confident than me. And instead of dealing with those feelings, I took them out on you. That's very mature of you to recognize that, I said. But understanding why you hurt someone doesn't erase the hurt. I know. That's why I want to make it up to you. Not just with words, but with actions. I'm going to come over twice a week to help around the house. And I want to take you out to lunch once a month, just us, to really talk. I'd like that, I said softly. Brandon reached across the table and took my hand. I've been doing a lot of thinking this weekend. About our marriage, about how we got here. I realized I stopped being your partner somewhere along the way. I started treating you like a service provider instead of my wife. That stops now. How do you plan to change it? I asked. Because I've heard promises before, Brandon. What I need is a concrete plan. He pulled out a piece of paper, folded and worn like he'd been carrying it around. I made a list. Starting next week, I'm taking over all the yard work and car maintenance. I'm also going to handle all the kids' appointments and school stuff. I'll do the grocery shopping every Sunday, and I'm going to cut back my hours at work. You can't do that. Your career. My career is important, but it's not more important than my marriage. I've been using work as an excuse to avoid being present at home. That ends now. He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. I don't want to lose you. This weekend without you made me realize how empty this house feels when you're not in it. Not because the dishes weren't done or the laundry piled up, but because you weren't here. Your presence, your warmth, your laugh. I've taken all of that for granted. I felt tears building, but blinked them back. It's going to take time, Brandon. You can't fix 20 years of neglect with a weekend of cleaning and a list of promises. I know. That's why I'm also committing to marriage counseling. Not just one session, as many as it takes. And I'm going to start individual therapy too, because clearly I have some things I need to work on. We finished dinner with lighter conversation. Small talk about work and school and the upcoming week. It felt strange, almost formal, like we were strangers learning how to be around each other. In a way, we were. I'd changed this weekend. I'd found my voice and my boundaries. They were going to have to get to know this version of me. After dinner, Sophie and Nathan insisted on cleaning up. I retreated to the living room with a cup of tea and watched the sun set through the windows. Brandon joined me, sitting in the armchair across from the sofa, maintaining a respectful distance. "Can I ask you something?" he said after a long silence. "Of course. When did you stop being happy? When did I lose you?" I thought about it carefully. I don't think there was one moment. It was gradual, 1,000 small moments where I felt unseen. Every time I tried to share something and got interrupted. Every time I accomplished something and no one noticed. Every time I asked for help and got told you were too busy. It accumulated over years until one day I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself anymore. I should have noticed. Yes, you should have. But I also should have spoken up louder sooner. I let myself become invisible because it was easier than fighting to be seen. We both failed each other, Brandon. The question is whether we can do better going forward. I want to try. I really want to try. So do I. But I meant what I said. I'm going back to work. I'm restarting my career. That's not negotiable. I'm not asking you to negotiate. I'm asking you to give me a chance to support you the way you've supported me all these years. We sat in silence as darkness fell outside. Upstairs, I could hear Sophie and Nathan talking, their voices low and serious. The house settled around us with its familiar creaks and groans. This place held so many memories. First steps and birthday parties and holiday dinners. Arguments and makeups and quiet moments of contentment. Could we build new memories here? Could we salvage what was broken? I didn't have answers yet, but for the first time in a long time, I had hope. The marriage counselor's office was in a renovated Victorian house in the Hawthorne district. Dr. Patricia Green was a woman in her late 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Brandon and I sat on opposite ends of a comfortable couch while she settled into her chair with a notepad. "Tell me why you're here," she said, looking at both of us. Brandon glanced at me, uncertain who should speak first. I jumped in. "We're here because our marriage has been failing for years, and we didn't realize it. Or I realized it and couldn't get anyone to listen. We're here because I finally broke, and now we need to figure out if there's anything left to save." Dr. Green nodded, writing something down. "And you, Brandon? Why are you here?" "Because I almost lost my wife, and I don't want that to happen. Because I've been a terrible husband, and I need to learn how to be better." The first session was brutal. Dr. Green asked pointed questions that neither of us wanted to answer. She made us look at patterns we'd been avoiding, behaviors we'd normalized over years of marriage. She didn't let us hide behind politeness or excuses. "When did you stop having sex?" she asked bluntly. Brandon and I both froze. "That's not really the issue here," I said. "Intimacy is always part of the issue. When did physical connection become optional in your marriage?" "I don't remember exactly," I admitted. "Months ago? Maybe longer?" "Try 2 years," Brandon said quietly. "It's been almost 2 years since we were truly intimate. We've had sex maybe 3 times in that span, and each time felt obligatory." Dr. Green leaned forward. "And neither of you thought that was a problem?" "I thought you weren't attracted to me anymore," I said to Brandon. "You stopped initiating. You stopped touching me casually. No hand-holding. No kisses beyond a quick peck. I felt like a roommate, not a wife." "I was tired," Brandon said defensively. "Work was stressful. The kids needed things. There was always something going on." "Sex requires energy and attention," Dr. Green said. "But so does your career, your hobbies, your friendships. We make time for what we prioritize. The question is, why did your marriage stop being a priority?" The session continued like this for an hour. Uncomfortable truths, long silences, tears from both of us. By the end, I felt wrung out and exhausted. But something had shifted. We'd said things out loud that had been festering in the dark for too long. "Your homework," Dr. Green said as we were leaving, "is to have 3 conversations this week. Real conversations where you put down your phones, turn off the TV, and actually talk to each other. Not about the kids, or schedules, or household logistics. About yourselves. Your fears, your dreams, your feelings." Brandon and I drove home in silence. When we pulled into the driveway, he turned off the engine but didn't get out. "That was rough," he said. "Yes, it was. Do you think we can do this? Fix things?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But I'm willing to try." That week was strange. We were hyper-aware of each other, tiptoeing around the house like strangers. Brandon kept his promise about taking over certain responsibilities. He mowed the lawn, organized the garage, took Nathan to a dentist appointment. Small things, but I noticed. Sophie came over twice to help with laundry and meal prep. She asked me questions about my upcoming interviews, seemed genuinely interested in my answers. Nathan surprised me most of all. One afternoon, I came home from the library to find him reorganizing the kitchen cabinets. "Mom, nothing in here makes sense," he said. "Why are the plates on the top shelf when you use them every day? Why is the good china taking up prime real estate when we use it once a year?" I'd organized those cabinets 15 years ago when we first moved in and never reconsidered the setup. Nathan's fresh perspective was illuminating. We spent 2 hours rearranging everything, and by the end, the kitchen felt more functional. "You're good at this," I told him. "Systems thinking. Have you ever considered industrial engineering?" He looked surprised. I thought that was boring. It's optimization and efficiency, making complex systems work better. You do it naturally. Maybe I'll look into it. He seemed genuinely interested, and I felt a spark of connection with my son that had been missing for years. On Wednesday evening, Brandon and I had our first assigned conversation. We sat on the back porch with glasses of wine, watching the sunset paint the sky. So he said awkwardly, "What should we talk about? Tell me something I don't know about you. Something real." He thought for a long time. "I'm scared," he finally said. "About getting older, about irrelevance. I see younger architects at the firm with fresh ideas and boundless energy, and I worry that I'm becoming obsolete. That's part of why I've been working so many hours. I'm trying to prove I'm still valuable." I was stunned. Brandon never talked about his insecurities. He'd always projected confidence, certainty. "You're brilliant at what you do," I said. "Everyone knows that. But for how long?" "Architecture is changing. Sustainable design, new technologies, different aesthetic values. Sometimes I feel like I'm clinging to a world that's already passed me by." "Is that why you've been so focused on work? Because you're afraid?" "Partly. And partly because work is where I feel competent. At home, I always feel like I'm failing. Like I don't know how to be a good husband or father. At work, there are clear metrics. Projects completed, clients satisfied, buildings built. At home, everything is murky and emotional, and I don't know how to navigate it." This vulnerability from Brandon was new. Or maybe it had always been there, and I'd been too angry to see it. "So you retreat into work because it's safer?" "Yes, and I know that's not fair to you. I know I've left you to handle everything else while I hide in my comfort zone." We talked until the stars came out. Brandon shared fears about his parents aging, about Nathan's future, about whether Sophie would be okay navigating her career in a cutthroat industry. I talked about my terror of going back to work after so many years away, about feeling like a fossil in a field that had evolved without me. When we finally went inside, I felt closer to Brandon than I had in years. It wasn't fixed. We weren't suddenly healed, but it was a beginning. My first interview was on Thursday morning at Morrison Engineering, the same firm that had offered me a position 24 years ago. I dressed carefully in a navy suit, styled my hair, applied makeup with a steady hand. In the mirror, I saw a confident professional woman. It had been so long since I'd seen her. The office was in a sleek downtown building with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The receptionist was younger than Sophie. She directed me to a conference room where 3 people waited. Gerald Morrison, who'd founded the firm 40 years ago, Linda Park, the current CEO, and Thomas Brennan, the head of structural engineering. They asked me about my education, my work history, the gap in my resume. I was honest. I left my career to raise my children. I did some consulting work over the years, but my primary focus was my family. Now, my kids are grown, and I'm ready to return full-time. "That's quite a gap," Thomas said, not unkindly. "The field has changed significantly. New software, new regulations, different methodologies. How do you plan to catch up?" "I've already started. I've been taking online courses in the latest CAD software, studying current building codes, reading journals and publications. I'm enrolled in a graduate certificate program starting in January. I don't expect to pick up exactly where I left off. I know I'll need training and patience, but I bring 20 years of life experience, problem-solving skills, and a perspective that someone fresh out of college can't offer." Linda leaned forward, interested. "Tell me about that perspective. What do you bring that a younger candidate wouldn't?" "I understand how buildings are used by real people with real needs. I've raised children, I've managed a household, I've dealt with contractors and insurance companies and municipal bureaucracy. I know what it's like when design fails users, when doorways are too narrow for wheelchairs or strollers, when light switches are placed inconveniently, when storage solutions don't account for actual human behavior. I can bring that user-centered focus to structural design." The interview lasted an hour. As I left, Linda shook my hand warmly. We'll be in touch within a week. But I'll tell you now, I'm impressed. We need more engineers who think about the human element. I floated back to my car. Whether I got the job or not, I'd done it. I'd shown up. I'd advocated for myself. I'd proven I was still capable and relevant. That evening, the whole family celebrated with takeout, Chinese food, and fortune cookies. Even Judith and Robert came over, and Judith pulled me aside. I owe you an apology, she said quietly. I've watched you care for this family for over 20 years, and I never once thanked you properly. I raised Brandon to think of marriage as traditional. Man works and woman keeps house. That was my generation's way. But it wasn't fair to you. You had dreams and ambitions that got sacrificed. I should have supported you more, encouraged Brandon to share responsibilities. Instead, I stayed silent because it benefited me too. You hosted holidays, cared for Robert after his surgery, took on all the emotional labor of family relationships. I'm sorry. Thank you for saying that, I replied, genuinely moved. It means a lot. My second and third interviews went similarly well. Different firms, different positions, but the same core message. I was valuable. I had skills and experience worth hiring. By the end of the week, I had 2 job offers and was waiting to hear back from Morrison. Brandon and I continued our counseling sessions. Dr. Green gave us exercises to rebuild intimacy. Small touches throughout the day. Compliments. Date nights. It felt awkward at first, almost performative. But gradually it started feeling natural again. I remembered why I'd fallen in love with this man. His dry humor. His gentle hands. The way he listened when he actually focused. One night, 3 weeks after the infamous dinner, we made love for the first time in years. Not obligatory, quick, get it over with sex. Real intimacy, vulnerability, connection. Afterward, lying in the dark, Brandon said, I missed you. Even when you were right here, I missed you. I missed me too, I replied. Sophie and I had our first monthly lunch. We went to a little bistro in the Pearl District and talked for 2 hours. She told me about Connor, the guy she was dating, how he challenged her to be better, but also supported her unconditionally, how he noticed when she was stressed and knew how to help her decompress. He sounds wonderful, I said. He is. And Mom, he reminds me of Dad, or who Dad used to be, who he's trying to be again. Your father is trying very hard. I can see that. The house is cleaner than it's ever been. Dad is home for dinner every night. Even Nathan is stepping up. She paused, playing with her napkin. I want that kind of partnership someday. What you and Dad are building now. Equal, respectful, real. Then make sure you never settle for less, I told her. Make sure whoever you end up with sees you as a whole person, not just a role they need filled. Nathan asked me to help him with his college applications. He decided to switch majors from business to industrial engineering. We sat together at the kitchen table, working on his essays, and I felt a surge of pride. This brilliant, thoughtful young man was my son. When had he grown up? The job offer from Morrison Engineering came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Senior structural engineer, specializing in residential and small commercial projects. The salary was $85,000, with full benefits and opportunities for advancement. I accepted immediately. That night, we celebrated properly. Brandon made reservations at our favorite restaurant, the one we'd gone to on our 10th anniversary and then never returned to because life got busy. Over candlelight and good wine, he raised his glass. To new beginnings, he said. To my brilliant wife, who never gave up. To second chances. To foundations, I added, the kind that hold strong even when everything above them is falling apart. We clinked glasses. Around us, the restaurant hummed with conversation and laughter. Portland stretched outside the windows, vibrant and alive. I thought about the woman I'd been a month ago. Small, invisible, exhausted. She felt like someone from another lifetime. I wasn't that person anymore. I'd found my voice. I'd set my boundaries. I'd reclaimed my life. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. balancing a demanding career with family, continuing to rebuild my marriage, navigating new dynamics with my children. But I was ready, more than ready. For the first time in 20 years, I was excited about the future. Not because everything was perfect, but because I'd proven to myself that I could survive being imperfect, that I could demand more and get it, that I mattered. My daughter had called me useless, and in response, I'd shown everyone exactly how essential I was. Not by doing more, but by doing less. By stepping back and letting them see what my absence created. Sometimes the only way to be seen is to disappear for a while. But I was back now, stronger, clearer, more myself than I'd been in decades. And this time, I wasn't going to fade into the background. This time I was taking up space. This time I was here to stay. My first day at Morrison Engineering was a Monday in mid-October. The morning was crisp and clear, the kind of Portland autumn day that made everything feel possible. I'd bought new work clothes, practical but professional. Brandon had made me breakfast, a small gesture that meant everything. Sophie had texted me at 6 a.m. with a string of encouraging emojis and a message that said, "You've got this, Mom. Show them what you're made of." The office was buzzing with activity when I arrived. Linda Park met me in the lobby and walked me through the space, introducing me to what felt like 100 people whose names I immediately forgot. My desk was in an open-plan area with 5 other structural engineers. The youngest looked fresh out of college, maybe 23. I was 47, old enough to be his mother. "Don't worry," Linda said, reading my expression. "Age diversity is an asset here. We specifically hired you for your experience and perspective. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." My first project was a residential addition in the West Hills. A young couple wanting to expand their small bungalow to accommodate their growing family. I met with them on my 3rd day, taking notes as they described their needs. 3 children under 5, one with mobility issues requiring wheelchair access. A home office for the wife who freelanced. A workshop for the husband who built furniture. As they talked, I saw the design taking shape in my mind. Not just the structural requirements, load-bearing walls and foundation specs and roof angles, but the human element. Wide doorways and a gentle ramp. Natural light in the office space. Soundproofing between the workshop and the children's areas. Storage solutions that accounted for toys and tools and the chaos of real family life. When I presented my initial plans the following week, the couple actually teared up. "You get it," the wife said. "Every other engineer we talked to just saw square footage and building codes. You see how we actually live." "That's because I've lived it too," I replied. Word spread quickly through the firm. The new engineer who thinks about users, not just structures. I started getting assigned to more projects, particularly residential work, where understanding family dynamics mattered. A multi-generational home for a family caring for aging parents. A renovation making a historic house accessible for a disabled veteran. A community center designed to serve a diverse neighborhood. I loved every minute of it. My brain felt alive again, solving problems and creating solutions. Yes, I had a steep learning curve with some of the new software and methodologies. Yes, I sometimes felt intimidated by younger colleagues who'd never stopped working. But I also brought something they didn't have. Context, empathy, real-world understanding. At home, the new normal was still finding its shape. Brandon had cut his hours at work and was home by 6 every evening. We cooked dinner together, something we hadn't done in years. He'd turned out to be decent in the kitchen when he actually tried. Nathan had taken over yard work completely and seemed to enjoy it, spending Saturday mornings with headphones on, mowing and trimming and weeding. Sophie came over every Wednesday for what we'd started calling wine and wisdom nights. Just the 2 of us, sharing a bottle of wine and talking about everything and nothing. Work frustrations, relationship questions, fears about the future. We'd become friends, not just mother and daughter. I treasured those evenings more than I could express. The marriage counseling continued. Dr. Green, pushed us into uncomfortable territories, resentments we'd been harboring, expectations we'd never articulated, patterns inherited from our own parents that we'd unconsciously replicated. It was hard work. Some sessions ended with both of us angry or hurt, but we kept showing up. That consistency mattered. One evening in late October, Brandon and I took a walk through our neighborhood. The trees were in full autumn glory, reds and golds, and oranges blazing against the gray sky. We walked hand in hand, something we hadn't done in years. "I've been thinking about something," Brandon said. "About us, about the future." I tensed slightly. Here it comes, I thought. The other shoe dropping. Things had been going well. Too well, maybe. What about? "I think we should renew our vows. Not a big ceremony or anything. Just us, maybe the kids, saying the words again with intention. Promising each other what we promise now, knowing what we know." I stopped walking. "Brandon, we're not fixed. We're still in counseling. We still have hard days." "I know. But that's exactly why I want to do this. Not because everything is perfect, but because we're choosing each other despite the imperfections. Because we're building something new on the foundation of what broke." I thought about it, the symbolism of it, starting over while acknowledging everything that had come before. "It's not a terrible idea," I admitted. He grinned, that boyish smile I'd fallen in love with 25 years ago. High praise from my engineer wife. We planned it for Thanksgiving weekend. Just family in our backyard. We'd write our own vows, speak them in front of Sophie and Nathan and Brandon's parents. No fancy dress or catering. Just truth and commitment and hope. As Thanksgiving approached, I reflected on everything that had changed since that awful dinner in early October. 2 months. That's all it had been. 2 months since my daughter called me useless and I finally broke. 2 months since I walked out into the rain and found myself again. Morrison Engineering asked me to lead a major project, a mixed-use development downtown combining affordable housing with commercial space. It was a huge opportunity and a huge responsibility. The project would take at least 2 years to complete. I'd be managing a team, coordinating with city planners and community groups, solving complex structural challenges. I almost said no. The old me would have said no. Too much pressure, too much visibility, too much risk of failure. But the new me, the one who'd learned her value, said yes. I said yes because I was capable. I said yes because I deserved the opportunity. I said yes because I'd spent 20 years making myself smaller, and I was done with that. Brandon threw me a surprise celebration when I got home that evening. Chinese takeout on the good china, champagne in actual champagne flutes, a homemade banner that read congratulations to our amazing mom and wife. Sophie and Nathan were there, along with Judith and Robert. Even Connor, Sophie's boyfriend, had been invited. "You're really doing it, Mom," Nathan said, his voice full of awe. "You're like a real career woman now." "I always was," I replied. "I just did different work before." Sophie hugged me tight. "I'm so proud of you, not just for the job, but for everything. For standing up for yourself, for showing me what strength looks like." Thanksgiving Day was cold and bright. I cooked, but this time I had help. Brandon handled the turkey. Sophie made desserts. Nathan was in charge of side dishes. Even Judith contributed her famous cranberry sauce. We worked together in the kitchen, bumping into each other, laughing, stealing bites. It felt like what family was supposed to be. At dinner, we went around the table, sharing what we were grateful for. When it came to me, I looked at each face. My family. Imperfect and messy and complicated. But mine. "I'm grateful for breaking," I said. Everyone looked surprised. "I'm serious. I'm grateful that I finally broke down, because that's what it took for me to break through. I'm grateful for being called useless, as much as that hurt, because it forced me to prove my worth. To myself more than anyone else. I'm grateful for this family, not because we're perfect, but because we're learning. We're trying. That's all any of us can do." There were tears around the table. Good tears, the kind that come from honesty and healing. After dinner, we moved outside for the vow renewal. The backyard had been decorated simply. String lights overhead, fall flowers in mason jars, chairs arranged in a small semicircle. Dr. Green had agreed to officiate, and she stood with Brandon and me facing our little audience. Marriage isn't about perfection, Dr. Green said. It's about commitment, choosing each other every day, especially on the hard days. These two people have done the difficult work of facing their failures and fighting for their future. Today they recommit to each other with eyes wide open, knowing exactly what they're promising. Brandon went first. His vows were simple and sincere. He promised to see me, really see me, to listen when I spoke, to share the load equally, to never again let his career or his comfort come before our partnership, to love me not for what I did, but for who I was. Then it was my turn. I looked at Brandon, at this man I'd built a life with. I promised to speak up, I said, to not let resentments fester, to ask for what I need instead of expecting you to read my mind. I promise to be honest, even when it's uncomfortable, to show up for our marriage the way I've learned to show up for myself. I promise to keep choosing you, not out of obligation or fear, but because I genuinely want to build a future together. We exchanged simple bands we'd picked out together, nothing expensive or elaborate, just symbols of this new beginning. When Dr. Green pronounced us recommitted, Brandon kissed me softly and our little audience applauded. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was better. It was real. That evening, after everyone had gone home and Brandon and I were cleaning up, I paused in the middle of the kitchen. He looked at me, concerned. "You okay?" "I'm happy," I said, surprised by the truth of it. Actually, genuinely happy. He pulled me into a hug. Me too. We stood there in our messy kitchen, dishes still needing to be washed, leftovers to be put away, all the mundane tasks of life waiting. But for a moment, we just held each other. Two people who'd almost lost everything and somehow found their way back. Not to where we'd been, but to somewhere new, somewhere better. December brought its own challenges. My workload increased as the downtown project moved into its intensive planning phase. I was working 50-hour weeks, bringing files home, attending evening meetings with community stakeholders. Brandon stepped up without being asked, handling more at home, making sure I had time and space to focus. Sophie got engaged to Connor on Christmas Eve. She called me immediately, breathless and crying happy tears. He proposed at Powell's Books, Mom, in the stacks where we first met. He remembered that I said I wanted to find love in a place full of stories. "That's perfect, sweetheart. I'm so happy for you." She paused. "Mom, I want to ask you something. Will you help me plan the wedding? Like really help, not just show up and take orders. I want your input. I want you involved." "I'd love that," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "And Mom, one more thing. I want you to walk me down the aisle. With Dad, obviously, but also you. You both made me who I am. You should both give me away. Or not give me away, because that's kind of a patriarchal concept. But you know what I mean. I know what you mean. And yes, absolutely yes." Nathan finished his first semester of his new major with straight A's. He came home for winter break talking excitedly about optimization algorithms and systems theory and all the ways engineering could solve real-world problems. Over hot chocolate one evening, he said, "Mom, I get it now. What you did all those years. You were engineering solutions to family problems, managing complex systems, optimizing for everyone's needs simultaneously." I'd never thought about it that way, but he was right. That's exactly what I'd been doing. And now I was doing it professionally too. Different scale, different context, but the same fundamental skills. New Year's Eve found Brandon and me alone. Sophie was with Connor. Nathan was at a party with friends. We could have gone out, joined the crowds celebrating downtown. Instead, we stayed home, cooked a nice meal, opened a bottle of good wine, sat by the fireplace talking. "What do you want for this new year?" Brandon asked as midnight approached. I thought about it. More of this. More honesty. More connection. More being seen and seeing you. More of us actually being partners. That sounds good to me. He raised his glass. To being seen. To being seen, I echoed. When midnight struck, we kissed like we meant it. Like we were starting something instead of ending something. Outside, we could hear distant fireworks and cheering. People celebrating the fresh start of a new calendar. But Brandon and I had already had our fresh start. Back in October, in the rain, when I walked out the door and found my courage. The months that followed weren't perfect. We still had fights. Still had days where old patterns tried to reassert themselves. Still struggled with balancing work and family and individual needs. But we handled it differently now. We talked. We listened. We adjusted. We kept trying. Morrison Engineering promoted me in March. Associate Director of Residential Structural Engineering. It came with a significant raise and a team of 5 engineers reporting to me. I was terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. At the celebration dinner, Brandon squeezed my hand under the table. "You've come so far," he whispered. "We've come so far," I corrected. Sophie's wedding was in June. A beautiful outdoor ceremony overlooking the Columbia River Gorge. She was radiant in a simple dress, her hair crowned with wildflowers. When the officiant asked who gave this woman to be married, Brandon and I stepped forward together. "Our daughter," we said in unison. "Our pride and joy." As I watched Sophie and Connor exchange vows, I thought about marriage. About how it's not one commitment, but 1,000 small commitments made daily. About how love isn't just a feeling, but a choice and an action. About how sometimes you have to break before you can heal. At the reception, Sophie pulled me aside. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. For raising me. For showing me what strength looks like. For not giving up on yourself or on us." "Thank you for giving me a reason to fight," I replied. We danced together, mother and daughter, while Brandon watched with tears in his eyes. Later, he and I danced to the same song we danced to at our own wedding 26 years ago. Except this time we were different people. Better people. People who'd learned that love requires more than just intention. It requires attention and effort and the courage to be vulnerable. Summer turned to fall. My downtown project broke ground in September. I stood at the construction site in a hard hat and steel-toed boots, watching the first foundation being poured. It felt symbolic somehow. Building something new on solid ground. Making sure the base was strong enough to support everything that would come after. Nathan started his junior year and declared he wanted to specialize in sustainable infrastructure. He talked passionately about designing systems that served communities while protecting the environment. I could see him becoming the kind of engineer who changed lives. The kind I'd wanted to be before I made different choices. Except they hadn't been the wrong choices, just different ones. And they'd led me here to this moment where I could be proud of who I was and what I'd built. On a rainy Saturday in October, exactly 1 year after that fateful family dinner, I found myself standing in the kitchen making a roast chicken. The house smelled of garlic and rosemary, just like it had that night. But everything else was different. Brandon was beside me, chopping vegetables. Nathan was setting the table without being asked. Sophie and Connor were coming for dinner, along with Judith and Robert. "Are you nervous?" Brandon asked, reading my face. "About tonight, I mean. Given what happened last year." "A little," I admitted, but also excited. "We've come so far." "We have." He kissed my forehead. "And if anyone calls you useless tonight, I'm throwing them out myself." I laughed. "I don't think that's going to happen." But I was wrong. Someone did call me useless that night. Me. When we sat down to dinner and went around the table, sharing what we were grateful for, I spoke last. "A year ago tonight," I said, my voice steady and clear, "my daughter called me useless. It was the worst moment of my life and the best thing that ever happened to me, because it forced me to prove, to myself more than anyone, that I had value, that my contributions mattered, that I deserved to take up space in my own life. I looked at Sophie, who was crying quietly. It forced us all to wake up, to see each other, to do better. So I'm grateful for that moment, as painful as it was. I'm grateful for breaking. I'm grateful for this beautiful, imperfect family that learned how to love each other better. I'm grateful for second chances. Sophie stood up and came around the table to hug me. I'm sorry, she whispered for what must have been the 1,000th time. I'm so sorry. I know, sweetheart. And I forgive you. Every single time. Dinner was lovely. Everyone contributed to the conversation. Everyone listened when someone else spoke. We laughed and told stories and enjoyed each other's company. It was everything that night a year ago should have been, but wasn't. After dessert, as we were clearing dishes, Nathan pulled me aside. Mom, I've been thinking about what you said last year, about all the work you did that nobody saw. I want to write about it for my engineering ethics class, about invisible labor and how we design systems that depend on it but never acknowledge it. I think that's a wonderful idea. Will you help me? Tell me about what it was really like. We spent the next 2 hours at the kitchen table, just the two of us, while I shared my experiences, the challenges of managing a household, the complexity of coordinating everyone's needs, the emotional labor of being the family's emotional center. Nathan took notes, asked thoughtful questions, really listened. When we finished, he hugged me tight. I see you now, Mom. I really see you. That's all I ever wanted, I replied. Later, after everyone had gone home and Brandon and I were getting ready for bed, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman, looking back at me, was 48 years old. Lines around her eyes and mouth. Gray, threads in her hair that she'd stopped bothering to cover. Tired but happy. Strong but soft. Someone who'd been broken and put herself back together in a better shape. Brandon appeared in the mirror behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. What are you thinking about? How far we've come. How close we came to losing everything. How grateful I am that we didn't. Me too. He rested his chin on my shoulder. You know what I realized today? What? That dinner a year ago was the worst night of my life too. Not because you left, though that was terrible, but because I finally saw how badly I'd failed you. How invisible I'd made you. It was like waking up from a dream and realizing you'd been living a nightmare. We've both changed so much, I said. For the better. Definitely for the better. We stood there for a moment, just holding each other and looking at our reflection. Two middle-aged people who'd almost given up but chose to fight instead. Who'd learned that love wasn't just romance and passion. It was showing up, paying attention, doing the work, choosing each other every single day. In bed in the dark, Brandon spoke softly. I never asked you this, but what would you have done if we hadn't changed? If things had gone back to normal after that weekend? I don't know, I admitted. I like to think I would have left eventually, that I would have chosen myself. But honestly, I might have just slipped back into old patterns. It's easier to be invisible than to fight to be seen. I'm glad you fought. Me too. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, small and quiet and fading. I thought about the moment at dinner when Sophie's words had shattered something inside me. I thought about walking out into the rain, about those days at the hotel, about finding my voice and my courage and my sense of self-worth. Sometimes we have to lose ourselves completely to find out who we really are. Sometimes we have to break before we can heal. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to us becomes the catalyst for the best thing. My daughter had called me useless, and in that moment I'd realized she was wrong. I wasn't useless. I was essential. I was valuable. I was enough. Not because of what I did for others, but because of who I was. That realization had changed everything. The rain started again outside our window, gentle and steady. Portland rain, familiar and comforting. I listened to it and to Brandon's breathing as he fell asleep beside me. I thought about my job and my projects and the buildings I was helping create. I thought about Sophie planning her life with Connor, about Nathan discovering his passion, about my marriage that had been rebuilt on honesty and effort. I thought about that family dinner a year ago, about silence and invisibility and pain, about reaching a breaking point and finding strength I didn't know I had, about speaking truth that needed to be spoken, about walking out a door and coming back through it as someone new. "You're useless, Mom." Those 3 words had nearly destroyed me. Instead, they'd set me free. They'd given me permission to demand more, to expect better, to reclaim the parts of myself I'd sacrificed on the altar of everyone else's needs and wants. I wasn't useless. I never had been. I just needed someone to say it out loud, to push me past the point of silence, to force me to finally fight for myself. And once I started fighting, I discovered I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. The rain continued its steady rhythm. Brandon stirred beside me, reaching for my hand even in sleep. I held on tight, grateful for this moment, this man, this life we were building together. Not perfect, never perfect, but real and honest, and earned through hard work and painful growth. Tomorrow I would wake up and go to work. I would lead my team and solve problems and create things that mattered. I would come home to a husband who saw me, children who valued me, a life that had space for all of me. I would keep showing up, keep speaking up, keep taking up the space I deserved. But tonight I would sleep, deeply and peacefully, because I finally knew my worth, because I'd proven it to myself and demanded that others see it too, because I'd been called useless and responded by becoming invaluable. The foundation was solid now. Everything built on top of it would stand strong. I'd made sure of that, not through silence and sacrifice, but through voice and visibility, through breaking and rebuilding, through losing myself and fighting like hell to find my way back. I closed my eyes and smiled in the darkness. Sophie had called me useless, and when I spoke, everyone went silent. That silence had been filled with truth and pain and revelation. That silence had changed everything. That silence had been the beginning of my voice. And now that I'd found it, I was never going quiet again. The story of how I reclaimed my life started with 3 cruel words at a family dinner, but ended with something much more powerful. It ended with me standing in my truth, living my worth, and building a future where I would never again fade into the background of my own existence. I was seen. I was valued. I was enough. And I would make damn sure it stayed that way. The rain fell. The city slept. And I rested in the knowledge that I had survived my breaking point and emerged stronger, clearer, more wholly myself than I'd ever been. Sometimes being called useless is the greatest gift you can receive, because it forces you to prove otherwise. And in that proving, you discover who you really are. I discovered I was everything, and that was more than enough.